very pleased today to have Dr. Prajak Kongkirati as our speaker. For those of you who know Thai politics and the literature about it, Dr. Prajak has, at a very young age already, made significant contributions to it, in particular his book in Thai on the student movement, published 2005, quite a long time ago, has received quite a bit of attention. Dr. Prajak recently received his PhD in the Department of Political and Social Change, the ANU in Australia, with the famous Paul Hutchcroft as his supervisor, with the dissertation entitled Bosses, Bullets, and Ballots, which he will be talking about today. He's also already published a book called The Not So Bloody Election, Violence, Democracy, and the July 2011 Elections, that was published 2013, but we're of course awaiting the dissertation itself, which will be published in the near future. In any case, Prajak, many thanks for coming. And obviously this is a fascinating time in Thai politics. It's, you just told me it's a little bit of a break during the Songkran, the New Year's festival, but perhaps in the discussion we can talk a little bit about the future of politics in Thailand. But we look forward to your talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I would love to thank you, Mark, for kindly inviting me to Hong Kong. This is my first time to visit the City University of Hong Kong, and also thank you, Irene, for all your help and the walking tour around the university. When I sat on the plane, coming from Bangkok to Thailand, there's a Thai lady sit next to me, and she asked me, "Oh, why you come to Hong Kong? For shopping?" I said, "No," because majority of Thai on the plane they're coming for shopping. I said, "I come to give a talk," and she asked me, "What are you going to talk about?" I said, "I was invited to give a lecture about Thai politics." She looks very perplexing, and she looked very worried about me. It's like I'm committing a suicide or doing an impossible task, because for me, how can you explain Thai politics to the outsiders? I said, yes, that's a good question, because it's very complex right now, and even among Thai, we don't know what's really going on in our country. But today, my talk, which is based on my dissertation, I cover the electoral violence from 1975 to 2011. But at the end of my talk, I would like to say something about the current situation and the latest election in February, which is already been announced ruled by the Constitutional Court as invalid and make Thai political situation impasse right now. Okay. Just give you a rough idea of what I'm doing in my dissertation. Basically, I want to explain what caused the electoral violence in Thailand and what made the pattern of violence change over time and also across space. But today, I think I have time to cover only the historical development, the part 2. For the part 3, I discuss the geography of electoral violence. I study 6 provinces in Thailand as a case study and try to explain why some provinces are peaceful, but some provinces are witnessing violence repeatedly in every election. That's the geographical dimension that I will have no time to cover today. So today we will be mainly focused on historical change of electoral violence in Thailand. Let me say briefly about my analytical framework, because I'm not the first scholar who touched on these topics of the killings, the violence, which is related to the elections in Thailand. But the previous works mainly focus on the characters of the perpetrators or the political actors who commit the violence. You might have heard about the Godfather literature done by people like Prajak Kongkirati or James O'Keefe, which is influenced by the literature from Philippines about the bossism. But in my, at the same time, another camp tried to debating that this framework of Godfather and bossism doesn't work for Thailand because electoral violence is not a problem for Thailand. Thailand has a very benign and peaceful competition, in election. This camp represented by people like Yoshinari Nishisaki, Andrew Walker, and some other scholars who try to refuse the Godfather framework. In my dissertation, I locate my work in between these two camps and try to show that what they lack is they don't see the variation. They try to put one model or one type of politicians and generalize it. The Godfather camp see violence everywhere. Another camp who deny the importance of violence try to ignore it and see only the peaceful side of Thai politics. So for me, I think we need, in order to understand electoral violence in Thailand and also political dynamics in Thailand in general, we need to see the interaction between the national politics and the local politics. At the national settings, in my dissertation, I look at several dimensions. I look at the characteristic of the state, changes in electoral and party system, central-local relations, and also the ideological contestation. These dimensions change over time, especially after the 1997, which is a very significant turning point in modern Thai politics. I will talk about the post-1997 politics later. At the local settings, I look at the power structure and political economy of elite competition in each province. And this interaction between the national political structure and provincial political economy and political structure produce variation in electoral violence. In some provinces, you see violence. In some provinces, you see quite a peaceful contestation. It depends on differing interaction and differing provincial political economy. So look at the timeline of the national elections. First, since 1975, we had 14 elections, general elections, including the latest one. We have 50. The number of the general elections and the numbers of the coup d'etat are almost, equal. So every one election we will have a coup, come after. This is a very interesting phenomenon. But I divide these 14 elections into 3 groups or 3 periods. The first one is in 1975 and 1976. It is during the elections were occurred during the democratic transition. This period ended with the student massacre. The second period starts from 1979 to 1996. It's quite a long time under the semi-democracy regime and weak civilian rule, a very unstable government, and weak executive power. The latest period covered 4 elections from 2001 to 2011. these elections occur under the Thaksin years and the post-2006 coup. So why I divide it into 3 periods? Because each period represents different pattern of violence and different dynamics of conflict. Let's start. What happened before 1976? I start from 1976, right? Because that's the, 1975. 1975, January 1975 is the first election that Thailand started to witness the killings and much of violence in election. Before this period, elections in Thailand were quite peaceful, very peaceful. Why? There were 2 main reasons. Because before 1975, most of the time Thailand was ruled under the authoritarian rule, the military regime. Under the military regime, the elective possess no real power. Election is not important. It's not a main venue, main channel to the power. And so it provides no incentive for competition at all. And the second reason is the electoral process itself were controlled almost completely by the military junta, by the governing party. So there's no real competition before in election in Thailand before 1975. So we witnessed the unfree and unfair elections, but not violence, because the government party used the dirty tactic, to steal the election. They don't need to use even the violence to kill any opponents, because there's no opponent, there's no challenge during the elections. In 1975 and 76, we start to witness the killings in elections. Elections were more cutthroat and competitive. The elections in 1975 occurred 2 years after the student uprising in 73, which successfully toppling the military regime who ruled Thailand for almost 15 years. In 75 and 76 that we witnessed the elections, what is interesting is it's not violence among the politicians, among the candidates, which we will see after 1976. These 2 elections, the pattern of violence were quite unique, very unique, and is electoral violence done by the state agencies, done by the traditional elite, and basically the perpetrators are the security officials backed up by the military leaders. The targets are the left-wing politicians, because during this time there were many emerging parties leaning on the left ideologies, and they contested in elections. Some are quite successful and popular. So the right-wing group, the right-wing elite, use violence to weaken the left-wing political party. They use the assassination, targeted the candidate from the socialist parties. Sometimes use bombs, throwing bombs at the election campaigning, try to scare off the supporters of the left-wing parties. So if we look at the killing at these elections, the violence were quite ideological. There's no personal conflict between the state officials, and the candidates who were the target. And the style of violence was quite indiscriminate and spectacular, mostly in the public, in order to intimidate both the candidates and the supporters to not coming out to vote for their candidates. So this is a table that I sum up the incidents and also the death toll of violence in these two elections. If you look at the number of the death toll, definitely the numbers are significantly lower than Thailand neighboring country, the Philippines. Marx is an expert for Philippines politics. Right? In every election, you have quite a high number of death toll, above 140, 150. In Thailand, the degree of violence is lower, and I will explain later why. So 75 and 76 represent something very unique. Then, Thai politics changed a lot in the 1980s and the 1990s. And electoral violence that emerged during this period will be a new pattern of violence that continue for up until today. So the trend that we witness start to occur after 1976. It is the electoral violence by bosses, and this makes Thailand moving towards the Philippine model. The political family, the political boss invested a lot in election in order to gain political position and then use political position to acquire the rent, and distribute it back to their network. And the so-called patrimonial oligarchic state start to evolve in Thailand during this time. The military, the power of the military and the bureaucracy start to decline, and you see the emergence of the political party and the provincial politicians who now enter politics, because during the semi-democratic period, parliamentary democracy start to consolidate, and election itself became a main channel for power. If you want to have a power, you have to run for election, contested in election. Elective posts became a major source of patronage, protection, and high rent after 1976. And because of the decreasing role of the military, now the perpetrators of electoral violence were mainly the bosses and their hired gunmen. And who the victims? They use their violence to kill their opponent, their rival candidates, who are usually the rival, also the rivals in business, not only in politics. And the killings that occurred during this period changed from ideological killings to private and non-ideological killings. There's no ideological contestation between the boss during the election. They have no difference in terms of political platforms or political ideas, and the only difference that they have is they were in different patronage network. The pattern of violence changed too. Is more secretive and less spectacular it specifically targeted, not random. So usually the boss use violence to kill only their rival. They don't target the voters. They don't target the election commissioners. They don't target even the journalists. Journalists was quite a target in the Philippines. Right? Dangerous place for the journalists to work. In Thailand, electoral violence by boss is very limited in scope and in degree. And one Philippine scholar said to me that it's quite rational. Benedict Kirkfleet, when I present my dissertation, he said, this is quite rational compared to Philippines. It's not random at all. And I said to him that one fact that make it different because the bosses in Thailand, they're not powerful yet in 1980s because the structure of the state and the historical development was quite different, right, between Thailand and Philippines. Thailand were ruled by the bureaucratic elite for quite a long time. So in every province, the bosses, when they emerge in the 1980s, they have to confront and compete not just their rival bosses, but the whole bureaucratic structure, the provincial governor, the appointed government officials who control power for many decades. So it's not the situation like the Philippines that the boss control the bureaucratic structure in their locality and or the government officials working for the boss. In Thailand, the government officials control the locality since Rama V, for several decades. But because of socio-economic change and the emerging of parliamentary democracies provide a space for new political actor, which is the provincial businessmen, the provincial bosses. In 1980s, the boss start to assert their roles in politics. So it's quite short span. If you look at the period the Thai political godfather have power, it's very short. It's just start after 1973, the political dynasty, the political families, and by the time that they reach its peak of power in 1997, the situation changed again. That went against their interests. The emerging of Thaksin and his populist party weakened the role of the boss. So the period that the political boss or political godfather, control power in Thai politics lasts for only about 3 decades, from 76 to 1997. And during this time, so we see the pattern of violence and degree of violence as you see in the table. Is violence of provincial bosses for provincial bosses, and violence became privatized. If you look at the numbers of incidents and death toll, it's not fluctuated. It's quite stable. I will explain in the next slide why the degree of violence during this time is quite stable for the whole period. So whereas the electoral violence from 75 to 76 was part of national ideological battle between the leftists and the rightists at that time, between the government and the communist and socialist parties. Electoral violence in the post-1976 period had become part of the struggle among provincial elite who aim to control wealth and power in their provincial areas. And as I told you, it targeted individual election-related actors, not the electoral process or institutions itself. Why they don't target the election process or try to destroy election process itself? Because the elections largely benefited the provincial political laws. So in a sense, the violence by bosses, they target the individuals, they target their rivals, but they were so respectful to the elections. For them, they treat the election process or election institution very sacred. You know, no one loves elections more than the Thai political bosses, because of the election that provided the power. It created the new political space for them. You know, it's violence in the realm of electoral politics. They don't hate electoral politics. They don't to go beyond the electoral politics. And I think this logic of violence is very significant if we compare it to the pattern of violence nowadays that we're witnessing nowadays, which is a new pattern at all. I will say at the end of presentation. Now the electoral institutions and process were the main target of the protester, not any individuals. Okay. And electoral violence occur in accordance with the demands, not the supply side. By this I mean violence happen not because in those provinces you have a lot of high gunmen. This is an explanation that was used by many scholars, especially the Godfather literature, that you have violence because you have a brutal bosses and you have a lot of high gunmen, you know, in Thailand. But if you look at the statistic, I see the opposite, because in many provinces that very notorious for being a hub of gunmen in Thailand, like Phetchaburi, Chonburi, you know, on the east coast, the elections were quite peaceful. Why? Because in Thailand, gunmen is high mobile occupation. They can work up in the north or in the south, depends who hire them. You know, if you pay them enough money, they're willing to travel, you know, up north or on the south. And since 1980s, the gunmen start, you know, to change forms. Before 1980, the boss control the gunmen. Gunmen work for the boss because they were loyal to the boss. It's like a patronage gunmen. But when the killings start to spread out, the gunmen became popular occupation, popular job. It paid well. The market of violence start to emerge. So many rookies or many new faces enter the market. So no bosses can control, you know, the use of violence. Everyone, you know, if you have enough money, you can pay like 1,000 Hong Kong dollar to kill local politicians in Thailand. So because the market of violence is very competitive, so it's offer you quite cheap price, you know. And so to understand the occurrence of violence, we have to look at the demand, not the supply, because supply is everywhere and supply is cheap. But not every province in Thailand confront the problems. So the demand mostly came from the political boss who invested heavily in high risk, high return business. and were desperate to enter political office to safeguard their business. This high risk, high return business were the illegal business, like drug trafficking, the smuggling, and also rent-seeking business. The business that you need a license or need the contract from the government. Once you secure, the license or contract, which usually, done by the political connections, you can monopolize that kind of business. For example, the liquor distribution, the lotteries, the construction business. Construction business is a daily business in Thailand because once you secure the contract, the license, you obtain the monopoly. So it's become a zero-sum game business, and to win over your rival, you need to have political power. So elections became a high-stake activities.
But sorry, just to intercede. Sorry for being ignorant.
Oh,
It's not right to call those people godfathers. You cannot call those people who are.
it's this the funny things, because in Thailand, it's the term that they used to call themselves, and they were proud. I mean, this provincial elite, they were proud of being called godfathers. And their favorite movie is The Godfather movie by Coppola, right? Francis Coppola. And many godfathers that I interview, I mean provincial elite, they try to imitate the characters in the movie. So it's funny, right? That not the art imitate life, but in this sense, this real character try to imitate the character in the movie, with all the dress, the sunglasses. So it's okay in Thailand to call them the godfather. But the young generation, they try to change their image. They want to look different from their father. And this changing of the generation is important too. Okay, so now elections become the high-stake business, and Bangkok is of course a final destination for our boss, because Thailand political structure is still very centralized. The power located in Bangkok, in the parliament and in the cabinet. Because you need to understand, before 1997, we don't have a decentralization yet. We don't have a direct elections for local administration. That happened after 1997. So before 1997, every boss want to be an MP in order to have negotiating power in the capital. The best or the dream position is the cabinet members in the high-profile ministries, like transportation or communication, that can distribute a lot of contracts to their followers and business associates. But okay, Bangkok or the capital is the final destination, but the war, the political war, the primary site of power contestation start at their home province. In order to go to the capital, to have power present in the capital, they have to secure their monopoly of power in their home province first. So the election in each province, that you see the confrontation between bosses became fierce, especially in a province that boss style candidate confronting with each other. Elections are more prone to violence because business and political conflict became inseparable. So there are situations I found in my research when bosses confront with a weak candidate or non-boss type candidate like lawyers, teachers, or professionals, NGO activists. Violence was not used. The election was not fierce because when confronting with this kind of weak candidate, the boss can use just the money, a strong political network that they have, the vote canvassers team that they have to defeat this kind of weak candidate. No need to use violence. Violence is quite a risky tactic. Is because you can get revenge, you can get killed, or you can get arrested by the police if you don't have a strong connections. So it's to understand the electoral violence, it's quite misleading. The Godfather literature present a misleading idea that the boss are brutal, they will use violence to kill all their opponent. But all the bosses, in fact, they are businessmen. They are not violence men by nature. They will use violence only if necessary. Only the conditions require them to use violence. Violence is like a last resort for them. If they can win over their opponent by other means, they will do it. Violence is not the first choice. So to understand the use of violence in Thailand, we need to go beyond the character explanation, but to look at the political economy side of it. And during this period, as you can see from the table, there is a lack of fluctuation in the degree of violence. The number of death toll varied between 7 or 8 to about 18, 19. Why? Because during this time is a time that Thai political system and power structure were not changing. About these 3 decades, no major structural or institutional change. The structure of the state is quite stable. There's no decentralization. The central-local relations are quite the same for a long time. And especially the election system and party system were the same throughout the period. There's no change of electoral system. So to conclude, violence is a tool mainly used by candidates whose wealth and power are based mainly on rent-seeking and illegal activities when they are confronted with strong rivals. So electoral violence is a killings, between the strong and the strong. It's a weapon of the strong against the strong. It's not the weapon of strong against the weak. And the question is, this type of candidate can be found in every political party and in every region, every province in Thailand. But why violence occurs in only some provinces? So this leads to the geographical variation question that I deal with in the second part of my thesis. But we will skip that. So you can see from this picture the violence, electoral violence in Thailand, as I told you, is not random, specifically targeted. So if you are voters, you are safe. If you are not related to the rival candidates, you are safe. Even the election commissioners and journalists are safe. They are very, usually the killings done by one or two gunmen riding a motorcycle, at night, assassinate their rivals on the street using handguns or machine guns. I interviewed many gunmen in my dissertation and many bosses. That's the funniest part of my field research. That's one particular chapter deal with the business of gunmen in Thailand. I love that part the most. I can tell you later if you want to know how the price is changing over time, and where you can find the gunmen if you want, if you go to Thailand and accidentally have enemies, and you don't want to go through a legal means.
Did you tell this to your dissertation committee?
I told, yes, Andrew Walker is my dissertation committee. When he asked me a tough questions, I thought, I know a lot of gunmen in Thailand. Okay, and I love this interview with the provincial councillor in Phetchaburi, a hub of gunmen in Thailand, a nice tourist spot. He himself is a member of the strong clan in his province, and he owned actually many illegal business. He said, if you want to understand electoral violence in Thailand, you need to understand that, why people kill each other. No candidate shoot their opponent to win election just because they really want to use their MP position to help poor villagers. None at all. We use violence, we invest in it because election worth killing. We can gain a lot after winning. So it's a conflict over vested interest. And the patrimonial structure of the state provide the incentive because it made the elective post became profitable. Okay, the last period covered 4 elections from 2001 to 2011. A lot of change happening in these 4 elections. First of all, you see a fluctuation of degree of violence. The elections in 2001 and 2005 were the most 2 violent election in Thai history. 26 people died in 2001, 30 people died in 2005. And the number of incidents increased significantly from the previous period. Now it rose to about 80 incidents per election compared to about 30-40 incidents in 1980s. But then suddenly you see a sharp decline of violence in 2007 and 2011. The death toll decreased to 10 and 14. The number decreased sharply from 81, 77 to 23. It increased in 2011 to 56, but still lower than 2001 and 2005. This is interesting because election in 2007 occurred 1 year after the 2006 coup. It was the election that everyone predicted it's going to be full of conflicts and violent contestation because the stake is very high at that time between Thaksin camp and anti-Thaksin camp. and the military intervened a lot in electoral process in 2007. But it turned out quite peaceful. In 2011, the context of election is interesting too. It occurred, just 1 year after the bloody crackdown in April 2010. The military used force to suppress the red shirt movement in the central area of Bangkok, killed almost 100 protesters. The bloodiest military crackdown in the history of Thailand. So elections that were called 1 year later that crackdown were expected by all sides as fiercest elections. Turn out is relatively peaceful, and not as bloody as people think. Why? In my research, I found that there are 4 national level factors that can explain the fluctuation. In this period, the electoral and political party system changed dramatically. The 1997 Constitution and the new design electoral system, which changed from the old electoral system, now to the new system that Thailand used, first past the post, and single member district and the party list system, and instead of the multi-member district as in the previous era, change the political balance, power balance in each province, because the single member district system, you confront with each other. It's a zero-sum game, right? You cannot come as a second or the third as a multi-member district. In a single member district, you have to win only, there's only the winner and the loser. It's a zero-sum game. If you lose, you lose, So in each constituency were redrawn, the boundaries were redrawn by the election commissions. In some constituency, the bosses, the strong bosses, have to run in the same district. And in that situation, they have no choice, they have to win. But in the past, they can come as a second or in the third, or they can avoid each other. But with a single member district, now it's a direct confrontation. And the second factor, the implementation of decentralization and its empowerment of local elective posts. After 1997, and with the new constitution, we implement the decentralization program. And now in every level in Thai political structure, we have a direct elections for local administrative posts, the provincial, the municipal, and the sub-district. So decentralization creates a new space of conflict, and each clan member or each boss try to consolidate their power, from the provincial deep down to the sub-district level. So they invest more in elections, try to put, their followers or their relatives, in every local elections, that make the, elections in each province fiercer. And the third one, the rise of the strong populist party and Thaksin. There's a lot of details about this because Thaksin changed Thailand, political landscape and the pattern of political contestation toward a new form. You could not understand Thai politics after 1997 without understanding him. Even now, for both sides, they claim that they went beyond Thaksin. The red shirt claim that they fight for democracy, they go beyond Thaksin. The yellow shirt said they go beyond Thaksin too for different reasons. But actually, Thai politics is still much about Thaksin in many levels. And Thaksin, why the rise of Thaksin and his party increased the violence in election. It not directed by him. I'm not implying that Thaksin party employ the violence method more than other political party. But the coming of him, the entering into politics of this billionaire changed the whole power balance and style of campaigning, and also his political ambition. He is not the first tycoon who entered politics, but he's the first one who ambitious enough to win the absolute majority in the parliament. Unlike a big businessman or political party in the past that aim to win only a simple majority in the parliament and form a coalition government with other parties. That's a pattern of the semi-democratic period. Right? So you have a multi-party coalition government, which is quite weak and unstable. A lot of negotiation between the factions in the party and the head of the party. Thaksin want to change this pattern, and he aimed to form a single party government, and he aimed to basically monopolize the political market. So when the election in 2001, the first election after 1997 constitution about to occur, he goes to every province and recruit the most powerful boss in that area to work for his party. And he spent a lot of money, to buy a vote canvassers of other political bosses to change sides, to change loyalty and to work for him. By doing this, he disrupts the power balance, political order in every province. And the dynamics of violence happen, in the province that, all bosses have not remained. In the province that all bosses, were bought by Thaksin and agreed to work for his political party, you see a peaceful elections because there's no contestation. But in some provinces, Thaksin were not successful in convincing some boss to work for him. They're still loyal to the Democrat Party or some other parties. You see a fierce contestation between the boss who side with Thaksin and the boss who against him. That the dynamics of electoral violence in 2001 and 2005. The last factor, the military coup and the emergence of ideological politics, surprisingly decreased electoral violence, the degree of electoral violence. Why? In 2007 election, the royal military elite intervened heavily, in election process. They secretly support the Democrat Party, the second major party who the main opponent of Thaksin's Thai party. They spend a lot of money and they ask soldiers to help, the Democrat Party in campaigning, and also ask the soldiers, the lower rank officials, to, suppress the election campaign of Thaksin party. Many vote canvassers of Thaksin party were intimidated by the army not to go out collecting votes. So a lot of interventions, and because of this suppression, it unintentionally reduce the number of violence incidents. It's not by their intention. Their intention is just to weaken Thaksin party and help the Democrat Party win the election. But by intervention in this way, the bosses, all rival bosses, they don't even dare to use the violence tactics or intimidation or assassination, because they were intimidated by the military. Now they confront with the military, not with their rival candidates. And in 2011, you start to see the emergence of ideological battle. So now, in elections, voters go to vote not just because of the money or the influence of the bosses, but now elections in Thailand very ideological. After the military crackdown, they choose the party that represent their interests and their ideology. The red shirt side with Pheu Thai, right? And the yellow shirt, the urban middle class, and the southern voter side with the Democrat Party. Not because of the money or the character of the candidates anymore, but it's more about their political stance toward the military coup, their idea and values about democracy. They view democracy differently, their views about the monarchy, the role of the judiciary in politics. So the public debate is very heated during the election time, and it different from the 1980s and 1990s, that voters choose different political bosses who can give them a better distribution of wealth or budget. But now it's more about a broader ideological factors that motivate them to vote for one party or another. And this ideological conflict, in effect, bypass the political conflict, private conflict between the bosses. If you look at the election result in 2007 and 2011, the Democrat Party and the Pheu Thai Party gained most of the seat. So Thailand moving toward the two-party system. The small and medium-sized parties suffer a big loss. These parties still dominated by the boss. They have no platform. They don't involve in the political conflict, the mass movement conflict between the red shirt and the yellow shirt. They still use the old tactics of vote buying and killings of their rivals as the main tools to win elections. They fail completely. They became irrelevant in Thai politics. If you look at the number of votes for both the party list seat and constituency seat that gained by the Democrat and the Pheu Thai combined is about 90%. So the rest of it, just 10% share among several small parties. So that changed Thai politics, and violence using by boss, which is the remnant of the old political order in the 1980s and 1990s when they dominate the politics, now decreasing, because to win the elections, especially to win election in the province that was a stronghold of the Pheu Thai party or Democrat party, you cannot just use the violence. It's not an effective tool anymore. To kill the candidate or the vote canvasser of the candidate of Pheu Thai party or Democrat party will not change the voting behavior, will not change the voting pattern. From 2006 to 2011, the terrain of political contestation in Thailand moved from electoral arenas to the street. And you can see that the state and street violence overshadow electoral violence. Instead of previous kind of pictures, the assassination, the targeted killings, you see more of this kind of violence. It's moved from the electoral politics arenas to the street. The military came back to the scene, the mass movement, confrontation with each other and with the state officials. Okay, let me finish this presentation with the situation in February 2nd, 2014 election. This election presents something very new and make my life more difficult for the revision process of my dissertation, because at the end of my dissertation I predict that if no structural change or no serious political accident happen, by that everyone knows, if you study Thai politics, what I mean by serious political accidents that will change Thai political landscape. We should expect to see the decrease of electoral violence in the next general election, which is supposed to happen in 2050, right? If Yingluck served the full 4-year terms. That's my conclusion of my dissertation. Given all the factors that I just explained, we should see the decrease of electoral violence. But I also said something about the worst scenario. I said that if the royal and military force choose to not play under the rule of the democratic game and try to use the extra parliamentary or non-constitution means to maintain their power in Thai politics, we will see more uncertainty and perhaps more bloodshed, right? Because there's no way out if they don't want to compete with Thaksin under the same rule of the game. So you have to, if you go out of the electoral politics, you cannot avoid using, the military to stage a coup and that will provoke the angry protest from the red shirt. Right? Okay, that's my dissertation. Right? And now the February 2014 election, which is very interesting because it represents a very new pattern of conflict and new pattern of electoral violence that Thailand never witnessed before. What we have seen is now, instead of violence by the state officials, like in the 1975 and 76, or violence by the gunmen and their boss, like in the 1980s and 1990s. Now, this time, the violence in election done by the ordinary people, by the masses, by the protester. And the degree of violence is, higher than 2007 and 2011, but not higher than the 2001 and 2005 elections. So it's more peaceful compared to 2005 to 2001 and 2005. The degree of violence is not the thing that make it interesting, the pattern of it, and the logic of it. This time the protester, use violence to attack the electoral process and electoral institutions, not the individuals, not any specific political parties. They disrupt the registration process, disrupt the campaign. They intimidate all voters not to come to vote on election days, and they block, the polling station. They disrupt the vote counting, and 6 million registered voters, were affected by the closures of the polling stations. On the polling day, many polling stations in Bangkok were closed down by the protesters. Every province in the upper southern region, could not conduct the polling because this is a stronghold of the Democratic Party, and Democratic Party boycott the election. So the protesters blocked every polling stations in the south. And on March 21st, just 2 weeks ago, Constitutional Court has ruled the February 2nd general election invalid because of many irregularities, especially the fact that they could not, finish the election in one day. The court claimed that the election is unconstitutional. You have to finish the election process in one day, right? But because of the protester blocking and disrupting the voting, the election commissioner could not, hold the election in one day. They have to call for the by-elections, right? The Constitutional Court said this is unconstitutional. It's a very, very strange reason, but now we were in, impasse. Before the election, the PDRC, which is the name of the protester group led by Suthep Thaugsuban, who is Deputy Prime Minister during Abhisit government. He make a campaign that if you love democracy, don't go to vote. This is a campaign of the protester. And these pictures preventing voters to vote. They ask for reform before election. that Thai politics need to be overhauled, before we can have a new general election. On the opposite side, the red shirt said, respect my vote. They want to go to vote. This is a picture of the government supporter who broke the chain, and successfully vote. Okay, so I think this is the end of my presentation. I think now we are in deep crisis because election itself, the democratic institution itself were the main target. And the urban middle class, the southern voters and traditional elite, they have no longer have faith or trust in electoral democracy. So now basically the electoral as the means to settle political conflict peacefully were rejected by one side of political polarization. And by rejecting the election now, the PDRC has escalated the political conflict in Thailand into another level. There's no way out. So if the electoral violence in the 1980s and 1990s, and also during the Thaksin period, represent a serious problem that we need to fix. Now electoral violence by the protester that reject the whole electoral institutions and process, I think present a more serious problem than the past. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for taking too much time.
Thank you very much, Prajak. We have some time left for questions. Jonathan?
I'll preface my remarks by saying I don't know anything about Thai politics, but I sense that wasn't the reason why I enjoyed your talk so much. I found it fascinating. One of the things I've heard discussed in the news was in relation to a point that you touched upon at the very end, which was this, court decision.
Mm-hmm.
And some concern that there's not a sufficiently independent judiciary. The judiciary has been politicized. Maybe it's always been that way, I don't know. But that, that has essentially taken off the table one possible way out. You said the military and the royalty were unwilling to step forward and defend democratic institutions, and now we can add to that perhaps the judiciary. And so I suppose that decision perhaps was not surprising, but I was wondering, in the absence of all of these protections, you say there's no way out. That sounds fatalistic, maybe appropriately so, maybe, but under such circumstances, what possibly could occur to restore democratic, well, I won't say restore democratic institutions, I would say put Thailand back on some sort of path toward something better than it is now.
Yes.
Is there truly no way out?
A very good question. That's difficult to answer because now the judiciaries play a very decisive role, and actually this is not the first time. It's in the past few years. So basically, I would say that it is the traditional elite has three main tools to derail the electoral democracy. The first is a reactionary political movement, the mass movement. clear the chaotic situation, in order to pave the way for the military to step in and stage a coup that happened in 2006. This time, military knows that the cost of the coup is too high. The new government might be boycotted by international community, and also the prospect of being protested by the red shirt. How you gonna deal with a million of people coming out to oppose the military installed government? So the military know that to stage a coup is not difficult, but to govern after the coup is maybe almost impossible now. So the task was left to the judiciary, and that's why some people said we already have a soft coup now, a new kind of the coup by the judiciary, because the constitutional court, now they just by their ruling they can unseat the elected prime minister. They can unseat the whole cabinet. So there's the balance of the check and balance between the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative is destroying. So how to restore it, I think it's now difficult because the judiciary was not elected. So they were not controlled by the people. So just a few elite who can, manipulate the court, the judiciary. And if that group of elite, tiny elite, still want to use the judiciary to unseat Yingluck government, and bring Thailand back to the old political order that were dominated by the military. No one can prevent that.
Prajak, if I can turn to the Philippines comparison, which you made reference to a couple times. I mean, I think that comparison is very useful on the whole. I mean, just to make sure I understand correctly, you're arguing that compared to the Philippines, Thai politics, although it became more patrimonial in the latter part of the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, it was less so than the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's become more ideological.
Mm-hmm.
And so those two factors, that basically the violence that you see emerging in this middle period that you talk about is due to the intensity of factional conflict. When you have intense factional conflict between these political bosses, you tend to have higher degrees of violence. And in the Philippines, there are fewer state constraints on that, and there are probably more bosses around as well. That would be another factor. One other thing about the Philippine politics, of course, is the fact that local elections are more violent than national elections. So the more localized the elections. So what you see in Philippine politics is actually violence doesn't help a presidential candidate. Because the presidential candidates who've had the strongest, the largest number of votes have tended to be those who are not the ones with the most bosses backing them. So for example, in the 92 election, Ramos won, but he had fewer bosses than Mitras, who came in third, and the second placer had virtually no bosses backing at all. So the bossism at heart, the violence in the Philippines at heart is highly localized. And that actually, when you get to, it's a little confusing because local and national level elections are together. So people think of them as national level violence, but actually it's quite localized. The other point about journalists and others being killed, I would disagree a little bit with Kirkfleet's observation. I mean, one reason journalists get killed in the Philippines is when they become allied with one of the political factions. So for example, the notorious Maguindanao massacre, you may remember, 2009, occurred because 32 journalists were going with a rival opposition candidate whose wife was registering him for a gubernatorial election. And so they were seen as partisans of this candidate, and they were killed along with everybody else who was trying to register this candidate. So maybe the thing about the Philippines is if you get involved in this factionalism, and for Thai journalists are sensible enough perhaps to stay out of the factional conflicts and they don't get killed. But that seems to me to explain that. So that's, I mean, maybe I just wanted to comment on that, so that as Thai elections become more ideological, and the point about Thaksin too, of course, the violence at the beginning of his period is the consolidation of this coalition, but once it becomes clear that Thaksin is the boss, and the local bosses work for him,
Yes.
then, and it becomes more ideological, as you say, then the violence will subside. So, and a final comment is, violence in Philippine elections seems to be declining. I mean, there's some controversy about that, but the high tide of factionalism seems to have be behind us, but still obviously more violent than Thailand. Sorry, final question was this. The one issue people argue about in Philippine politics is how do you know exactly how many people were killed? Because unfortunately in the Philippines, and probably to a somewhat lesser extent true of Thailand, people get killed a lot in local level things. And it's unclear whether it's strictly political or not. How do you know for sure? I mean, these are your statistics, I think.
Yes.
Maybe you could talk also a little bit about that, how you're sure that this is really politically related.
Yes, thank you, Mark, for many comparison. I think very useful for me in revising my dissertation. For the last question, yes, I think it's quite challenging because in Thailand, the election commission, they don't collect a statistic on electoral violence. It's very, I could not understand why they don't, collect this statistic. So we don't have a good data. So what I have done is I have to collect data for myself based on the newspapers. So in every election, I will collect data from the newspaper 3 months before the election day and 1 month after the election, because sometimes the killings occur after the voting day, especially the boss kill their own betrayed vote canvasser who switch sides and work for the rivals. So they make a revenge and punish those vote canvassers. So in every election, I collect data from the newspaper, and I think it's easier than the Philippines in the sense that you can see from the number, sometimes less than 10. So the highest number is 30. So it's not like 100, right? That I need to cover. And also but the tricky questions is how to differentiate the political killings or election-related killings from the personal killing, because some committee also asked me the same question. Then how about the boss, having the affairs, right? And they get killed because of this personal problem. I admit that this is still, at the end, is difficult to pinpoint. But you can look from the all related news about that murder, because it's not a one-day report. Right? In the following days, the journalists report about this murder, and there will be more information come up. And if information show that this murder is clearly related to political contestation, I will count it. Sometimes some murders of the boss during the elections, there's more information show later in the later reports showing that they were killed because of the other conflict, business conflict or personal conflict. I will, rule it out. So it need to, to look at the follow-up or investigative report.
But it was a lot of work, I can tell.
It is. It is. So I spent 2 years for 1 year for 1 year and a half for field research, and another 6 months just on this newspaper, analyzing data on the newspaper.
Relate to your field research, just I'm interested in your ethnographic procedures for getting contact and speaking with these bosses.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like, and was it easy, and were they forthcoming? Did they want to share these stories?
Some are very forthcoming, very surprising. Yeah, I need to use a lot of connections. Yes, I use a snowball method. Because actually in each province, everyone know each other. Among the elite, among the community of active political actors are very small in the province. So if you can start from getting to know one, establish a good relationship with one boss, it will be a lot easier. They will recommend you to other. And if you were introduced by boss, everyone will be willing to, help you. So some of my friends, they are members of the political dynasty. So I use my friends' connection. Yes, but some are very direct when I interview him, and I put a lot of this anecdote in the second part of my thesis. And that's one boss that very frightening. He killed a lot of people, but nowadays he's not as powerful as he was because he could not adapt to the changing environment. He's still using the old tactic, killing people. But when I asked him that, oh, you feel safe nowadays, because I saw him walking around alone without the gunman or bodyguard, in the province. He said, oh, I feel very safe, unlike in the 80s and 90s. I asked him why. He said, all my enemies are dead already. So I fear of no one in this province. And I asked him, oh, but now you losing in election twice already, how you gonna return, make your return? I said, no, easy, I just be too soft in the last 2 elections. So he still believes in coercive force that he controls, but he is not aware of the whole changing landscape that has been brought by the economic crisis and new constitution in the 1997, military, Thaksin, but many bosses in Thailand still live in the old world, have a narrow-minded about the world, their own society.
I also don't know much about Thai politics, but I'm from India and we are not really strangers to this dysfunctional politics and political patronage bosses. What puzzles me about your story is that who or what is driving the development process in Thailand? Because you were talking about political bosses who are just rent-seeking, but you did mention bureaucratic elites, and how were they so insulated from this? Because Thailand did, from 1976 to 1996, and even now, has done, on economic development, has done quite well. And in 97, after the Asian financial crisis, had a robust response.
Mhm.
So how do you think that has been managed in the middle of the West?
It is the economic development start in 1950 under the military dictatorship regime, and the model is quite similar to some other countries. That you have a strong military regime, close politics, but adopt the economic development, at that time from the World Bank and the US. So the military regime, they create a very well-functioning and knowledgeable technocrat. A group of technocrats is very professional, and at that time they were insulated from the electoral politics, right? And interest groups. So they pushed forward the economic development in the 1960s. So it occurred first under a dictatorship political environment, and after that we still maintain quite a capable senior bureaucrat and technocrat in the main accord organization like Central Bank of Thailand or some ministries. The bureaucrats who were recruited to work in those institutions are quite capable. So these are the team that responsible for formulating policy and push forward the economic development. But also there are many negative sides of it, because this group of people, they get used to working under the unelected government. They don't like the elected government or elected politicians because they think they know better. So they were upset with the Thaksin new style of government and also the populist policy. So you see a clash between the old bureaucrat and technocrat and Thaksin and his group of politicians.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to say, as people leave, there are working papers, information about CERT. Prajak, thank you very much for that talk. Thank you for your interest, everybody. And again, many thanks.